What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are here on the Alabama channel at the voice of college football. In this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 returning players for Alabama for the upcoming 2022 college football season. So we're looking at who the best players were from last season that are returning, not counting new players, transfers, freshmen, or anything like that. We usually do a top 10 players a little bit later in the offseason where we'll just kind of project the top 10 players based off of what we think is going to happen next season. This is kind of based off of last year, just which 5 players from last season's team were the best that are coming back. And we will start here with number 5 as we count it down. Number 5 is Cameron LAta, the tight end. Last season had 26 catches, 410 yards, 8 touchdowns. Not a ton of receptions at 26, but I mean, that's a very solid number for a tight end. He was 5th on the team, 5th in receptions on the team, so I mean, that's pretty good. But it was more about the big plays. He had 8 touchdowns. That was tied for 2nd on the team with John Mechie, so he was able to be a big-time red zone threat for them. Averaged 15.8 yards per reception, so a lot of big plays as well. Coming back this year, I think he's going to be maybe the number 2 tight end in the SEC behind Brock Bowers. So yeah, this is a guy that I think is going to be a big weapon for them. It was very close for me at number 5. DJ Dale was kind of in that conversation. I was really looking at those two, but I only had one other offensive player, so I decided to go offense, and we decided to go with Cameron LAta at number 5. Moving on to number 4. It's Henry To'oTo'o, the linebacker, transfer from Tennessee. He made an immediate impact for this team last season. Led the team in tackles, had 111 tackles, had 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, had a pass breakup, a forced fumble in there as well. But really became a leader for them at that linebacker spot. And again, filled in very, very well coming over from Tennessee. Where would Alabama have been without him? You know, that's a question. I mean, he was really big for them, and a lot of people expected him to actually go off to the NFL, but he is returning, and that is a big deal for this defense. He was a 2nd-team all-conference selection in 2021. Number 3 is Jordan Battle, another guy that I think a lot of people expected to go to the NFL. He had 85 tackles last season, 3 interceptions. He took 2 of those back for touchdowns, so had some big plays in there as well. He was a 3rd-team All-American selection in 2021. And this is a guy that, I mean, he was big time for them. Number 4 on the team and tackles from that safety position, and made some big plays for them as well. Had 1 tackle for loss, but was, I think, a bigger impact. You know, you don't usually see a ton of tackles for loss from safeties, but he made a big impact for them in the secondary. He should be the leader of that secondary coming into 2022. I think you all know who 1 and 2 are. It's just a matter of which order you want to put them in. I'm going to put the Heisman winner at number 2. Bryce Young, I have at number 2. We all know about Bryce Young. Threw for almost 5,000 yards last season, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He was a 1st-team All-American, a Heisman, the Heisman winner, and a lot of people would say since he won the Heisman, he should probably be number 1 on this list. I don't think that he is, because I think there's another player better, and you all know who it is, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But yeah, Bryce Young was huge for them last season. A lot of big plays. His QB rating was 167.5, a 67% completion percentage. That number, I think, was a little bit lower than some of the other big-time quarterbacks we've seen in recent years, just because he had to throw the ball away a lot. The offensive line wasn't great, of course. If you put him behind a great offensive line, if he wasn't under pressure as much as he was, man, what would his numbers have looked like? They would have been unbelievable. But still, even with some offensive line play that wasn't great for them last year, he still put up crazy numbers. Still was the Heisman winner last season, and didn't do a whole lot on the ground. I don't know if he will run it any more this year. Probably not. I think he actually wound up with like 0 yards. Of course, sacks coming off of that. I would kind of like to know what his numbers were what his rushing numbers were when you take off sacks. I'm not really sure what that number was. But, you know, he can use his legs. Might have to a little bit more if the offensive line continues to struggle, or maybe they get better there and he can sit in that pocket and put up even bigger numbers in 2022. But number one, it's Will Anderson. I think he was the best player in college football last year. I think he's going to be the best player in college football this year. I mean, just look at the numbers. 101 tackles, 31 tackles for loss, 17.5 sacks. He's a first-team All-American, of course. I mean, these are just insane numbers. And the fact that he didn't get invited to New York was just, I mean, that was just terrible. I mean, like I said, I think he was the best player in the country. I probably would have voted for, if I had a Heisman vote, I probably would have voted for Will Anderson. He knocked down 3 passes as well. I guess the one thing that he was lacking is he didn't really force any turnovers, no forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries, no interceptions, you know, anything like that. That's really the only stat that kind of held him back. But when you talk about getting after the quarterback, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, there was no one better than Will Anderson. I think he'll be the best again in 2022. The leader of the defense, the emotional leader of this team. I think he's the best player coming back from Alabama. Bryce Young, obviously, you can make an argument for him as well, the Heisman winner. But for me, it's Will Anderson. I think he's the top player returning for Alabama in 2022.